If you attended, how's the sound? Need to go closer. If you haven't, let's see. Yeah. If you haven't figured out, we're still trying to figure out all the sound system associated with the Zoom live service. We reflect. Pre-COVID, we had the in-person service down. During COVID, we had the Zoom down. And now we're something else. Something else. Okay. If you attended last week's service, or perhaps if you watched the YouTube recording of the sermon, we asked the question, are you asleep? Last week we talked about spiritual slumber, when a person is going through life unaware of the world as it is, without empathy, without compassion. We ask, are your eyes open so that you can see the world as it is? Are your ears open to the sounds and joy of the sorrows of this world? Spiritual slumber. This morning, we're going to ask another question. Are you awake? Now, before we get into that, I want to invite you into a non-binary view of life. Our culture and education divides the world into categories: right, wrong, left, right, happy, sad, just, unfair, lazy, energetic, effective, ineffective, asleep, awake. For now, let's not look at life as either or. 2 services in a row, are you asleep, followed by are you awake, is not opposing views. Not opposite. Today's message is not a counterpoint of last week. What does it mean to be awake? The website Thrive Global has a definition that I really like, and I'll quote it. In very simple terms, being awake refers to the individual who embraces an inner knowing that there is much more to life than what the traditional world sees, what the traditional world understands, or supports as reality. It means that an individual has experienced, learned, and remembered, or is finally convinced there's more at play than what is accepted as normal. The bottom line is that this person, an awake person, is sparked and open to new concepts. Inevitably, they learn that their life is a unique journey to self-healing and transformation. The individual who embraces an inner knowing that there is more to life than what the traditional world sees. I really like this definition because it describes more than just being present. You can be present without being open to new concepts and new ideas. You can be aware without realizing that there is more at play on what is accepted as normal. And this definition doesn't go to the extreme of being an enlightened being. Doesn't say you have to become a bodhisattva, one who achieves enlightenment but doesn't choose to leave this realm, but stays here to teach other people. So for me, being awake isn't about enlightenment or being present. It is about embracing that inner knowledge, about understanding that there is a mystery of love all around us that we cannot fully comprehend, but we can occasionally get glimpses of it if we happen to be awake. So, but how do you become awake? Well, from our chalice lighting this morning, Carl Jung says you don't waken if you look at the outside of yourself. You only awaken by looking inside. If you look outside, you're dreaming. If you look inside, you can become awake. And I believe there are times and places for each of us to become awakened. They're fleeting moments that come to us. And if we're paying attention, we can be awakened. This has happened to many famous religious leaders. The Buddha, in my opinion, wasn't awakened under the Bodhi tree. He was awakened when he left his safe, secluded, walled fortress of a family and walked among the population, seeing for the first time disease, the declining old, hunger, cruelty, and injustice. That awakening set him on his spiritual journey. Saul of Tarsus, a Pharisee intent on destroying early Christianity, was awakened on the road to Damascus when Jesus appeared and Saul was blinded. He became awakened, became St. Paul, and began to see the world as it is. Joseph Smith, on September 1823, was awakened with a vision from the angel Moroni. From that and other visits, the Book of Mormon came to be, and today over 16 million people claim and follow, say they're Mormon. Henry David Thoreau and the poet Mary Oliver credit their awakening as being in nature and being in solitude. And most every minister I know can name a time and a place when they were called to be in service through this rather weird life endeavor called ministry. I also believe that being awakened is not a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It's not when the blue light's flashing, you get more chances. If you miss the first chance, it'll come again and again. And it does come multiple times to you. Almost always, when you are paying attention, when you're awake, awakening comes to you when you are spiritually asleep. You're asleep, and then you get these little glimpses, and you can become awakened. I once had a person come to me and said, I really want a spiritual awakening. You can't schedule this stuff. You can't download an app and become spiritually awake. If you wish and pray really, really hard, will you become awake? None of these attempts worked for me. But remember, Jung said we need to look inside ourselves. But how do you look inside yourself? I mean, it's time to be really brutally honest here. This is hard work. Just like it's easier to stay in bed rather than get up and go to church or go to work. I mean, that happens to me. It's hard to get up sometimes. It's easier to stay spiritually in your slumber. It's easier to be spiritually numb than it is to look inside yourself and become awake. Let's also be honest with ourselves. We don't want to work very hard at stuff. This is not your fault, not totally, because you're a product of your culture. We live in a culture bombarded by advertisements to get what we want, fast and easy. We live in a society where instant gratification is too slow. We live in a place where you can buy a program to become physically fit in only 7 days, where you can lose weight immediately after you buy this single product. We're always looking outside of ourselves for changes that we want in ourselves. And in addition to looking to the quick fix and the easy path, we have fear and trepidations about looking at ourselves and the inside. If we honestly look at ourselves, we might see how imperfect we really are. We might see that we're different on the inside than we are on the outside shell that we present to the world. This is uncomfortable territory, what Jung calls the shadow. To look inside yourself, you really need to see the entirety of who you are. And without getting into psychoanalysis, Young shadow is the darker side of your own psyche. Your shadow is your unconscious emotional blind spot, something that your ego tries to hide from yourself and others. So when we look inside ourselves, we see our shadow, and just that shadow can be harboring guilt, shame, frustration, anger, selfishness, and hate. Why would you do that kind of inward looking? But can you really become spiritually awakened if you don't recognize and accept your shadow as part of yourself? Can you be spiritually awake if you are unconsciously hiding something? So let's return to the definition of being awake that I started with. Being awake refers to the individual who embraces an inner knowledge that there's more to life than what the traditional world sees. It means that this individual has experienced and is finally convinced there's more at play than what is accepted as normal. The bottom line is that an awakened person is sparked and open to new concepts. But I say being awake is not enough. Just embracing an inner knowledge is empty. Just being convinced that there's more than what is accepted as normal is insignificant. Just being open to new concepts is of no real consequence. Mary Oliver says it this way: being only awake is merely reporting. Being awake changes nothing. Just being awake is not whole. To be whole is to be awake and live a meaningful life. It's akin to being a hermit in the desert whose brilliant inspiration is totally kept to herself. To be whole, you must have purpose. You must have empathy. To be whole means you are awake and respond to the needs around you. To be whole means you are awake and align your life to be of service to others. To be whole means you are awake and continue to contribute to try and making this world a better and better place, even if you don't see it in your lifetime. Being awake, it's very important to understand reality as it is. That's essential. To be awake and open to new concepts is foundational. But being awake should not be your end goal. You shouldn't waken up and then hang out, eating peeled grapes, thinking great thoughts. Being awakened is only the beginning of being whole. There's work involved, but the rewards are wonderful. Rewards like purpose, meaning, compassion, and love for everything and everybody. It's difficult. It's worth it. Let's work on this together. Amen, and blessed be.